In November, I made a video about the UK government's digital ID plan. I called it a scheme that would hand the state total control over your ability to work, rent, and access services. I said the safety framing was cover for something much more sinister. A lot of people in the comments said I was being paranoid. A few said I was fear-mongering. Some said the government had already backed down. Didn't you see the U-turn in January? I'm back to tell you that there was no U-turn. The scheme is still alive. The infrastructure is being built right now as you watch this video, and buried inside a government consultation document that almost nobody read and that quietly closed 3 days ago is a proposal so significant that it should be front-page news. It isn't, so let's talk about it. For anyone who didn't see the original video, in September 2025, Keir Starmer announced plans for a national digital ID scheme, initially dubbed the BritCard. The stated purpose was twofold: tackle illegal working by making digital ID mandatory for right-to-work checks, and make it easier for people to access government services. On the surface, mundane enough: efficiency, modernization, progress. Except the details told a different story. The scheme would collect your name, date of birth, nationality, residency status, and photograph into a single digital credential held on your phone, linked to government systems. It would become, effectively, your permission slip to participate in the British economy. Almost immediately, the public reacted. A parliamentary petition opposing the plans gathered 2.9 million signatures. That's one of the largest petition responses in recent British history. Parliament debated it. Big Brother Watch, one of the country's leading civil liberties organisations, described the proposals as wholly un-British and warned they would create what they called a domestic mass surveillance infrastructure. Cross-party opposition emerged. An open letter from independent MP Rupert Lowe, expressing what he called profound and passionate opposition, was signed by more than 30 MPs from multiple parties. Green MP Cyan Berry led a formal parliamentary motion calling for the plans to be scrapped entirely. So the public pushed back, hard, and in January 2026, the government appeared to blink. In January 2026, headlines declared that Starmer had abandoned plans for compulsory digital ID. Rachel Reeves said she was pretty relaxed about what form of ID workers use. The narrative was the government heard the concerns and walked it back. Here's what actually changed. The government announced that the digital ID card itself would not be mandatory for British citizens. You wouldn't be legally required to carry it or to get one. Access to public services would not be made conditional on having it. That sounds like a retreat. It isn't. What didn't change: digital right-to-work checks remain mandatory. By the end of this Parliament, 2029, employers will be legally required to verify their employees' right to work using a digital system. The government has simply clarified that the specific BritCard is not the only route to satisfying that requirement. A biometric passport or existing digital immigration status will also be accepted. But here's the thing: if your employer is legally required to run a digital right-to-work check, and the digital ID is the most convenient way to pass that check, and it's free, as the government has confirmed it will be, then the pressure on every working person in Britain to get one is not legal, it's practical. It's economic. Your boss isn't going to wait for you to fish out your biometric passport every time the rules require a digital check. You'll get the ID, not because the law makes you, because life does. This is how these schemes always work. They are never mandatory on day one. They become indispensable, and then they're mandatory in everything but name. In March 2026, the government launched a formal public consultation on the digital ID scheme. The consultation ran to the 5th of May, 3 days ago. You probably heard very little about it. Here's what you definitely didn't hear. On page 24 of the government's consultation document, buried under bureaucratic language about next-generation digital public services, is this proposal. The government is considering developing what it calls a Universal Unique Identifier, a single number tied to your digital ID and to gov.uk One Login, the government's unified account system, that would follow you across every government service you use. The explicit justification given is that currently we cannot know when it is the same person accessing different services. The Universal Identifier would fix that. Read that again. The government is openly consulting on creating a single number that links your identity across every interaction with every government department: tax, benefits, healthcare, immigration status, driving license, criminal record, all of it potentially cross-referenced under one identifier. And here's Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, who said openly on the record that digital ID could have much wider uses in the future. Much wider uses in the future. File that away. While the public debate has focused on whether the card is mandatory, and the government has used that question as a firewall against scrutiny, the actual infrastructure of the digital ID state has been constructed almost without comment. The Data.Access.Use Act 2025 came into force in December 2025. This gave statutory legal footing to the UK's Digital Verification Services Trust Framework, the regulatory architecture that governs which private companies can verify your identity and under what rules. In March 2026, the government published version 1.0 of this framework, complete with a new trust mark called UK Certified, which certified companies will be entitled to display. There is now a government office, the Office for Digital Identities and Attributes, which I genuinely could not make up, dedicated to building and regulating this ecosystem. Gov.uk One Login already exists. It already replaced over 190 separate government login systems. Gov.uk Wallet already exists. It already allows people to store government-issued documents digitally. The digital ID that Starmer announced is not a new project being built from scratch. It is the final layer being placed on top of infrastructure that has been under construction for years. This is important to understand. The argument that the government might shelve the scheme if public opinion demands it is largely theoretical. You do not spend years building a unified login system and a digital wallet and a trust framework and a new regulatory office and then shelve it because a petition got 2.9 million signatures. The Public Accounts Committee launched a formal inquiry into the scheme in late April. They have been critical of the government's failure to explain costs. Note that the government has rejected the Office for Budgetary Responsibility's estimate of £1.8 billion without providing its own alternative figure. It is a government that cannot tell you what this scheme costs because it does not want you to know, or because it does not know itself. Neither option is reassuring. This is not the first time a British government has tried this. In 2006, Tony Blair's Labour government passed the Identity Cards Act, introducing a national identity card scheme. The scheme was voluntary, officially. In practice, from 2008, anyone applying for a foreign national identity document would automatically be added to the National Identity Register. Biometric passports were to be linked to the register. By 2010, some 15,000 people had a card. Then the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition came to power in 2010. The Identity Documents Act 2011 repealed the entire scheme. Existing cards were cancelled. The National Identity Register was destroyed. The entire project was scrapped because the political will to kill it existed. The lesson the current government appears to have drawn from Blair's failure is this: don't build a card, build the ecosystem, build One Login, build the wallet, build the trust framework, build the universal identifier. Make the card just the optional consumer-facing product on top of a surveillance infrastructure that is already embedded. Then, when a future government comes to power promising to abolish it, there is nothing obvious left to abolish. It is, I'll grudgingly admit, a cleverer approach than Blair managed, which is precisely why it's more dangerous. The consultation closed 3 days ago.
Now, according to the government's own timeline, a People's Panel for Digital ID, roughly 100 randomly selected members of the public, will convene in a series of workshops between now and the 21st of June. They will hear from experts. They will be supported by facilitators. They will produce recommendations. The government has been explicit that this panel will not make decisions. It will produce recommendations that will help inform government policy. So the People's Panel is a legitimacy exercise, a mechanism by which the government can say it consulted the public, heard the concerns, and proceeded anyway. Following June, the government will publish its response to the consultation and begin the process of designing the final scheme for rollout before 2029. At which point the architecture that is already built will have a public face, and that face will be marketed to you as convenience, as modernity, as safety.
What it will be is a permission system, a system under which your ability to work, to rent, to access services, and eventually to do much more will be mediated by a state-issued digital credential linked to a Universal Unique Identifier that connects your life across every government database. And if you lose that credential, if it's hacked, if it's suspended, if the system goes down, if you are flagged in error, you will have to prove to a bureaucracy that you are who you say you are without the one document that everyone now expects you to have. That is not a surveillance state in some science fiction sense. That is a very mundane, very practical transfer of power from you to them. I said in November that this scheme was about control, not convenience. The government's January announcement was designed to make you think the fight was over. It wasn't. The consultation that just closed was designed to make you think you had a voice. You did. Whether it was listened to is a different question. The infrastructure is built. The legal framework is enacted. The consultation is closed. The People's Panel is next, and after that, the scheme. Pay attention to this, because by the time most people do, opting out will no longer be a real option.